All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Week 13, neighboring revisited. And I had the mic here at the beginning to remind me to tell you that when we do have discussion, I'm going to ask you to speak into the mic so that everybody here can hear you, but also it's live streamed and recorded so that it shows up on there as well. So I know that is maybe discourages some of you from participating or speaking, but just pretend like nobody beyond this room is hearing you, and it'll be fine. You're not on the video, your image is not on the video when you speak in this, just your voice, if that helps. But, and Caleb's going to be my mic runner. All right, so week 13, we're wrapping up kind of our revisiting of the neighboring class. We're going to be talking about loving your neighborhood today. Before we jump in, there is a handout that you can use to take notes. Before we get into this week's specific content, I just wanted to see if anybody would like to share kind of one of two things. Either how this class has challenged you, and that could be, the last few weeks or earlier in the year when we went through this, or so how has the class challenged you, or are you doing anything differently as a result of the class? So I can take like two people. Beth. And Kayla, is the mic on? Just hold it down till the green light comes on. There you go.
Okay, I love to go to thrift stores, and what I've noticed is, in thrift stores you go more slowly than in a grocery store. So I've talked to more people. So that is fun for me, and mentioning church or Christ or Jesus is more easy.
So you're just consciously making a point to talk to people more.
And the other thing I noticed from last week was, I think for Mark and me, it is harder. Well, we just don't practice hospitality. We think we're going to. We get challenged, but then we don't end up doing it because it's not in our pattern of life.
Yeah.
So we continually get challenged, so some of the neighbory things that have to do with hospitality, we're not even doing it to our church friends.
Okay.
So
it's difficult to establish those habits, but then once they become a habit, it's not so bad. One more person, if any. Rosie, I didn't see you over there. Watch out for those fingernails.
One thing that's kind of challenged me is actually setting aside time to have those meaningful conversations with people, because I tend to be a very busy person and kind of like on a schedule, like do this, do that. But it's just setting aside like something that's like not that important and like going and having those conversations.
Good. All right, thank you guys, girls, I should say ladies, for sharing. So we're going to talk about loving your neighborhood today, so kind of expanding the conversation beyond just individually seeking to interact with neighbors to thinking about the neighborhood as a location, and then even our role as a church, as a congregation, so corporately our role in loving neighbors. So first, we're going to talk about loving our neighborhoods, then the church and your neighbors, and then the church as neighbors. So first, with loving our neighborhoods, what do I mean by neighborhood? And it's not a trick question, but kind of two overlapping ideas. On the one hand, you could think of a neighborhood as the people who live in close proximity to you. So depending on whether you live in like a residential neighborhood or an apartment complex or condos, that can look differently about who lives in close proximity to you. If you're a college student in dorms, maybe people across the hall. So on the one hand, it's the people that live nearby. On another angle, and it's related, is kind of your local area or district, which could be bigger than just the street you live on. I live in Southwest Escondido, which is kind of, if you look at the way the city of Escondido divides up the city into different districts, Southwest Escondido, a lot of it seems to not be in the southwest part of Escondido, but it's kind of a big stretch of area west of the 15. So we're thinking about the people and the place. And why should we think about or care about loving not just our neighbors, the people, individuals, but also the neighborhood? And let me give you 3 reasons. We'll just go through these briefly. But the first one is a theology of place, and I can't give you a full theology of place right now, but what I mean by that, by a theology of place, is that place, physical space, and particular places matter to God. And this is obvious if you can see it in Scripture, even from the very opening pages all the way through. You have the very beginning, Genesis 1, God creates a place for his human creatures to occupy, to live in, a physical space in which to live, in which to flourish, in which to fulfill their vocation as God's image bearers. And so, he puts Adam and Eve not just in any place, but a particular place, right? The Garden of Eden. And then moving along in redemptive history, you have God promising a particular land to Israel, the promised land. And then, fast forwarding to the end of Scripture, you have, again, a place, the new heavens, new earth, a particular place in which God's people will dwell. And so there's a lot more that could be said about the theology of place, but place matters to God. And there are some challenges we face, I think, in thinking about place. One, let me just give you a couple. One would be rootlessness. So a lot of us here are transplants. We're either not from the San Diego area, or we're not from California. We, moved here for a job or for school or any number of reasons. But, a number of us are not native San Diegans, native Californians, and so there's not, deep roots in this area. Maybe you don't have a lot of family in this area. You don't have necessarily a strong connection to the just what makes San Diego and the institutions here. And I think about the high school that I went to in Rancho Bernardo. It was built like 4 years before I entered school there. None of my friends' parents had gone to school there. Most of my friends' parents didn't even live in the area when they were in school. But I think when I was younger, living in New Jersey, and the elementary school that I went to was this big multi-story brick building. It had been there at the time for like 75 years. The town had been a steel mill town, I think. A number of my friends' parents went to school at that elementary school. Like, they would have stories about the cafeteria food, and it was the same kind of food, all these years later. So a lot of us here, though, by contrast, don't have those kinds of roots. And so there's rootlessness. Another big one is just kind of urbanization and commuter culture. So, a lot of us commute to where we work. We spend a lot of time on the road, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. When I was a software engineer, I would spend at least 45 minutes each way driving. And so, driving to this place that's kind of far from where I live, spending time, most of my day in the workplace with people who also live, either further south in San Diego or people coming from, Temecula and beyond. And everybody's coming to this place, which is great, but then, we spend all this time together at work and then we go our separate ways. We go back to our neighborhoods, and the neighborhood's really just a place to sleep, right? It's just, you go back home, you go into your cave, close the garage door, eat dinner, maybe watch some TV, go to bed, get up, do it all over again. And so there's, that commuter culture can make it difficult for us to think about a particular place and where we live, because we just don't spend a lot of time where we live, or, all the people among whom we live are doing the same, driving far to work, coming home, shutting the door, and going into their cave. Also, one other thing, just technology, and maybe this has been ramped up even in the last few years with Zoom and other things like that, where you can be in many places vicariously. You have these meetings at work with people from all over the country on the call, or again, when I was a software engineer, we'd have these daily stand-up meetings, and we had people, one guy was in India, we had another guy in Europe, we had another guy in Texas, and then a few of us in the room. And so it gives you this false sense of connectedness, that, we see each other's faces, we get to talk, but it can make actual real relationships difficult. So those are some of the challenges we encounter when we're trying to think about a particular neighborhood or a particular place. But I do think it's important for us to recognize, we believe in God's providence, right? We believe that God has providentially ordered our lives such that we live here in this particular city. I know not everybody here lives in Escondido, so if you live in Vista, God has providentially ordered your life such that you live in on whatever street you do in Vista or San Marcos. But God has put us here, and we could even say God has put GBC here at the corner of 11th and Redwood, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But it's not an accident, and doing good to our neighbors also involves loving the particular people among whom God has planted us, and the particular place we call home. And so, why the neighborhood? First, a theology of place, that place matters. Second, the second and third points go together, direct influence and personal influence. And I thought about, what could I draw on the whiteboard to take like 5 seconds of me not talking, or talking while I'm doing it. And one thing I thought about is, with this idea of direct influence, often when we think about some of the big issues affecting our state, the state of California, or just big national issues, problems, things like that, our role is often very limited, right? However, at the local level, you think about the city of Escondido, or even the county of San Diego, or maybe more narrowly, just your particular neighborhood, the community where you live. You can have a more direct role in the issues that are plaguing your neighborhood, or just problems, or seeking solutions. This is all I thought of for drawing on the board. This is you. It's a good resemblance, right? I mean, it kind of looks like Robert, sort of. You think of concentric circles. If this is you, it's really, you can be involved out here at the far circle or the far edges, But your influence is way less out here. Now, there are ways, we can be involved at the national level, voting, that kind of thing. But where you're really going to have a direct influence is these closer areas. And related to that is personal influence. Why the neighborhood? Because you can be directly involved. You can be personally involved. You can know the people that you're trying to love. They can know you, rather than way out here at the national level. And I'm not saying it's unimportant to be involved at this level, just because it's not important, but at a closer level, your neighborhood. Or Southwest Escondido, whatever. You can have real relationships with the people you're trying to love, which is much different than just, donating money to some organization, national organization, international organization, which is not bad, and you can do that, but you don't know the people. Whereas, seeking to be involved at a much more local level, even we're talking neighborhood level now, you can know those people, you can know their concerns, you can know their needs, you can know the common problems that maybe people in your area encounter. And so what could it look like? What could it look like to love your neighborhood? And I just mentioned a few questions we could ask ourselves. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. Different cities, different neighborhoods have different needs, different opportunities. But what are a question we could ask ourselves, what are the needs of my neighborhood? Now, to be able to answer that question, we have to slow down, right? Kind of like Beth was saying about she's slowing down at the thrift stores and talking to people. We actually have to slow down and think about, well, what is my neighborhood? Who are the people here? And do I know anything about them enough to know what some of their struggles are? Some examples, maybe people in your neighborhood find it difficult to connect with other people. Maybe your neighborhood is all, relatively new. Let's say it's relatively new construction, so you have a bunch of new people to the area. They don't really know anybody, and everybody, as I mentioned a moment ago, kind of keeps to themselves. I mentioned last week, you don't find many homes with front porches anymore. Everything has moved to the back of the house so that you don't have to see anybody. And so they find it difficult to connect with people. It's just outside of work maybe, or maybe kids' sports or something. It's difficult to find friends. Difficult to find quality childcare, or maybe a particular issue in your neighborhood is crime and safety. Several years ago, I went to a meeting for a guy who was planning a church in a particular area of Escondido. That particular area, which was kind of defined, it was a square mile of Escondido defined by different roads, was known as a very high crime area. And the Escondido Police Department would not answer calls for those neighborhoods unless they could send in like multiple squad cars, because it was pretty dangerous and they didn't want to send an officer by himself or herself. And one thing that the community finally recognized is there really weren't many streetlights, or streetlights, not stoplight, traffic lights, but streetlights. There weren't many streetlights in the area. It was dark. I think there also was not sidewalks. I can't remember. But the community worked with the city to install a bunch of streetlights, and it dramatically changed things in that neighborhood. It didn't, completely transform the neighborhood. There were other things they did as well that had a big impact. But just something almost as simple as installing more streetlights made a huge impact on that that neighborhood. Far less crime. The people who lived there felt safer, that they could actually, be outside in the evening and not be in danger. So, think about loving our neighborhood. Here's an opportunity if you have something to share. What are some maybe ways you've found to be involved in your neighborhood? So something closer to home rather than, Washington, D.C. And remember, you have to speak into the mic if you share. Caleb will twist your arm if you resist. All right, different question. What challenges have you encountered or do you anticipate? Rosie, again? Sorry.
During like fall time, we make a lot of pumpkin bread, so sometimes we'll like bring it around our neighborhood and like go deliver it to people, and that tends to make people really happy. Or like if our garden is doing good and we have like a lot of extra like vegetables, we'll go bring that around too.
Have you, when you've done that or after you've done that, have you noticed, like, is it easier to talk to those neighbors after you've done something?
Yeah,
like that?
because we've like already like gotten through like introductions and stuff like that, and now it's like more of a comfortable space where you can like talk to them and get like deeper conversations with them.
That's great. So either how have you been involved, or maybe you've tried to and you found it's very challenging. There's kind of roadblocks, or you anticipate encountering roadblocks. Darcy.
Well, one way for us is a lot of the people directly in our area, we all go to the same school. Our kids go to the same school. So just being available to pick up kids and drop off kids. But that's also an obstacle because it is like you offer that and it's like, you have to be ready to take them up on that. And sometimes it means like scheduling like, okay, I need the van today versus the car or just different things like that. And so it's been something that we've been happy to do, but it's also like, whoa, okay, like you realize how much something even that small, that's time and energy and, we get to homework later or, just different things like that. So it's been interesting.
Good.
You were mentioning the change, like the change in the neighborhood, changing the thing. So when we first moved in the house that we're in now, Jared and James were real little, and a majority of the people in the neighborhood had kids the same age. So it was really easy. It was very organic. And so for up through even Jacob and Jesse, it was real easy because there was kids the same age. And when we left and we came back from our move to Spain, we got back and all the kids are grown up, moved out. A lot of neighbors have left. And so now all the parents, all the people that are in the neighborhood, there's a lot with real little kids, 10 years or younger. So it's a little harder. Back then it was kind of fairly easy because all the kids are playing together. So you're out there talking to your neighbors. And now I just find it a little harder to go out because there's not as much, it's not easy like it used to be.
You don't have that connection.
The kids are playing, so you're standing out there talking to the parents. Now it's go out there and I went out the other day because the neighbor across the street had his, was playing basketball with his, little kids and they're riding around. So I chatted with them for a while, but that's the kind of thing you just kind of have to, it's a little harder now.
Yeah.
Because that has to be more of a conscious decision rather than, oh, the kids are going out to play, so I'll go out and watch them play and talk to the neighbors at the same time. So it is a bit harder and more of a conscious decision that you have to make.
Yeah, because now Jacob and Jesse are big and scary.
One big help that we've had is having a dog that needs a walk twice a day. So we get out into the neighborhood, and he's expanded his territory to include every street around us. So we patrol the neighborhood. And because you have the dog, it's not strange for people to see you there. In fact, we've met some people who said, oh, I know you. I've seen you out walking your dog. And so there's a point of communication that, I have a dog too, or I know you, I've seen you in the neighborhood, and it's just a good place to start conversation. And then we get to know other people's friends through them.
Yeah.
And people start to open up when you see them time and again about some of the other things that are happening in their lives. A person that we've known for a while had a fall recently. She needed some help. We were able to communicate about that, tell her that we're praying for her. And so the relationship just grows deeper. So, the fact that we have to do that frequently makes us build it into our schedule.
Yeah. That's a great point about a pet. I'm thinking Piper over here has something. There's particular neighbors in my neighborhood that I don't know personally, but I recognize them because they're always out walking their dogs, and they have these really cool dogs, and so it just catches your attention. It's a good point. Piper, did you have something?
I was just going to say, our neighborhood, like she said, or my mom said, that we have people that go to the same school. And when I was in junior high, I had a group of friends, and then I moved into high school, and they came to my house a few times during COVID, and they're like, do you guys just want to go for a walk? And I got to meet several of the other neighbors because they were friends with them. So then we kind of just were this mob of teenagers. That was probably pretty terrifying, just walking around the streets. And then I also was going to say, at school, I walk into school every day, and there's the office lady, and she always says good morning, and we have a little conversation. And just school is a little neighborhood because you have bonds with your teachers or with certain students. And so I walk around, and every morning I have a half hour, so I go to each of the teachers that I know, and I just say good morning, and we just have a little conversation. So I was just going to say it's not just your neighborhood, but school can be part of that.
Yeah, the school's a little community to itself. Do you know the office lady's name?
Miss Magna.
Okay, I was going to give you homework if you didn't know her.
I know her actual name, but I have a feeling if I called her Vicky,
No, I don't mean her first name. All right, good. I'm gonna keep going just because we've got a little bit more to cover, but those are great examples of ways to make connections. Okay, so loving your neighborhood. Second, let's talk about the church and your neighbors. So, it's one thing for us as individuals to be engaged in our neighborhoods, but what role, if any, does the church as a congregation have in your neighbors' lives? Typically, or at least I could say typically for myself, I think it's true for many of us, we think of evangelism primarily in terms of an individual activity. It's something I do maybe in conversations with coworkers, I'm always having to evangelize Craig. He's a big pagan, and it's a little, I don't get to evangelize coworkers when I work at a church, but maybe conversations with coworkers, or other, door-to-door evangelism or whatnot, just an individual activity. But normally, evangelism should be corporate in nature. And what I mean by that is the life of the local church, so not just individual Christians, but the body of believers together, embodies and bears witness to the gospel. So there's a lot that goes on just in our life together as a congregation, as we're trying to love each other, interact with each other. Ideally, gospel love is on display. Ideally, there's gospel unity amid diversity. I mean, we're people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different life stages, and yet we have this common faith in Jesus Christ that binds us together, and that kind of unity is rare in the world. I mean, typically, it's rare. And the church as a corporate body, living out who we are in Christ and seeking to follow Christ together can be a very compelling witness. So it's not a replacement for verbally sharing the gospel with somebody, but it puts flesh on the words that we share with people. They see like, oh, okay, this is how this looks when it's worked out in the life of a group of people. It can be very compelling because it's not just words, but actual actions married to the words. The church community is one of the most powerful tools for evangelism. And I don't know that we typically think like that. Often we keep our Christian and non-Christian worlds separate, right? Or mostly separate. We go to church on Sundays, we see our church friends, we talk, we have a good time, and then we go home, and Monday through Saturday, we work with non-Christian friends. We maybe have some non-Christian friends in the neighborhood or other social groups, and the two rarely mix. And I put down here in my notes, we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we keep those two worlds completely separate. Our non-Christian friends need to see the life of the church in action. You think of what Jesus said in John 13:35. By this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So, question by implication is, how are our non-Christian friends going to know that we have love for each other if they're never around us and our Christian friends, our church? And so we want to look for ways to kind of bridge that gap. Now, obviously, it can only go so far, but there's a lot we can probably do to bring non-Christian friends within the orbit of our Christian social circles. Let me just give you some examples, and maybe you have some of your own. So number one, just mixing our social circles. You have maybe a barbecue. I mean, we're moving out of summer now, but it is Southern California. You can barbecue most of the year. You have a barbecue at your home. Maybe you invite some GBC people and some people from your block. So, rather than making it strictly, church friends, include some neighbors and church friends. And, it's not like some bait and switch thing where you get your non-Christian friends there and then your Christian friends all gang up on them or something like that. But it's just mixing those social circles. Going to the movies, invite some friends from church and some friends from elsewhere, non-Christian friends from elsewhere. It can be uncomfortable. I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, man, that would go so poorly if I brought those two groups together. So, you got to be wise in how you do it, and maybe you invite certain Christian friends and not others, or certain non-Christian friends and not others, but mixing those circles to some degree. Maybe another way, and this is related, involving GBC friends in just the normal activities of life. Maybe you bring a church friend with you to your daughter or son's soccer game, and they come and hang out with you in the bleachers. Yes, I said soccer, not baseball, because I know a lot of you play soccer, or some of you. We're a baseball house, so I wouldn't invite anybody to a soccer game. But, you bring a church friend with you. And in part, you get to hang out with them during practice or the game or whatever, but then also you can introduce them to some of the other parents, teammate parents and things like that. And you can tell them, oh, I know this person. We go to church together. And it could just be that. But again, it leads to mixing some of the social circles. There's lots of other ways that could happen. Maybe one or two of you could share if you've tried to do this, if you've tried to mix the social circles. How have you tried to do it? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Does anybody have examples? Thomas, are you raising your hand? No. Renee. Soon the Roblin family is going to be out of sharing time. No, I'm joking.
When the kids were younger and we would celebrate birthday parties more regularly with families rather than just their friends, that was a great way to include families that might not be from GBC and the ones from church. And then they just maybe get to know each other a little bit, and seeing each other maybe year by year, there might be some connections made there.
Yeah. Yeah, kids' birthday parties are great. All right. So, loving our neighborhoods, the church, and your neighbors. We want to try to get those two groups to interact. In part, I'll just say this last thing about the church and your neighbors. In part, it's the body of Christ corporately that puts on display Christ and His mercy and His gospel, and there's only so much that an individual can do, and your neighbors seeing the body of Christ together is like this full-orbed witness to the gospel that might go beyond what you yourself can do individually with them. So the last thing we want to talk about is the church as neighbor. So, the folks who live kind of in this vicinity around 11th and Redwood, they view this church building, and by extension, this church, the people, as part of the neighborhood. If we asked people, if we went down the street and ran into some people and asked them, what kind of neighbor is Grace Bible Church? What would they say? My guess is they wouldn't have much to say, just because we kind of keep to ourselves. There's not much going on here during the week. Sundays are the big day, and they might not say a whole lot. I think it's easy for us to view ourselves or our church as just, we use the neighborhood. It's just a functional thing. We have a building here. It provides space for us to meet in, and that's about it. But we're not really part of the neighborhood. Now, I'm looking around. I don't think anybody actually lives right in this neighborhood. Is there anybody? Yeah, the Roblins used to live right there. Hannah used to live very close to within the building. But, it's easy for us to think like that. We're not part of it because we don't even live right here. Kevin and Terry are pretty close. How far away, Kevin? Within a mile. Yeah. Okay, so you're part of the neighborhood. You're close. Yeah. But we want to start viewing Grace Bible Church as a part of this neighborhood. And so two things we can think about: showing consideration and showing care. So what would it look like for us as a congregation to show consideration? One thing, and we talked about this months ago when we looked at this material. We're in a neighborhood where there's limited parking space, so the streets are fairly narrow. There's already a number of residents who park in the street, and then on Sundays you bring in 100 plus cars, or maybe less, I don't know, for church, and it creates an interesting problem. I've noticed we go through seasons where this happens, where it's crowded, and then so somebody parks right on the corner here, and it makes it really hard for if you're coming down 11th towards Redwood and you want to either cross Redwood or turn, you can't see cars that are coming down Redwood toward 11th. And so, we create this maybe a headache for our neighbors. Now, our immediate neighbors across the street have been really gracious. They don't mind us parking here on Sundays or anything like that. Some of our neighbors park cars in our parking lot during the week, and then they move them on Sundays so that they're not taking up parking spaces. We have a good relationship with them. But, showing consideration, realizing like people live here. And then GBC descends on the neighborhood and creates congestion and takes up parking. As far as I know, nobody's complaining right now about us and our parking. I think you all are pretty considerate about that. But thinking, we should consider, how does our Sunday worship affect our neighbors? And it's reasonable for us to ask that. It's not ridiculous for us to think, how are we on Sundays from 8 when do the musicians get here? 8 o'clock? At 8 when the musicians get here through 1 p.m. or more. How do we affect the neighborhood? I mentioned parking, noise, which is not really a big issue. It was maybe a bigger issue when we were meeting outside, and so we tried to make sure we weren't overwhelming the neighborhood with, we had speakers set up so that you could hear people speak and you could hear the music. We tried to make sure not to overwhelm the neighborhood. And I did notice when we were meeting outside, a couple of the neighbors would sit outside during the music, actually. I guess they enjoyed listening to the music. But, noise, trash, which again is not currently a problem for us, but all those, the way we use the facility and even the outdoor area could have a big impact on the neighborhood. And all of that's one motivation. There are many, but one motivation for beautifying the exterior of our building, beautifying the outdoor property. I mean, it shows that we're invested in the neighborhood, that we actually care how the neighborhood looks. It shows that we care about how our presence affects others. If we, and we don't do this right now, but if we just let the building just kind of go into disrepair and, the landscaping has been neglected for months and there's lots of weeds and all that, it has an impact on other people's property values, right? Just to be pragmatic. I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate that, if they're trying to sell their home and they drive in and there's this building that looks like a Masonic lodge and it's in disrepair. Probably not good for their ability to sell. Also, it just shows that we're not weirdos. And one thing we've realized is, at the front of our building right now, you've got these 2 doors here that don't have any windows or anything in it. And the doors, when they're closed, it kind of is like, what's going on inside that building? There's a bike shop over on, a bicycle shop over on Escondido Boulevard, near Escondido Boulevard in 15th maybe. And they've got these really cool signs out front, but there are no windows in front of the building, and the doors don't have any windows, and the doors are always closed. And I thought to myself, if I ever needed to bring my bike in there for some reason, if I needed to get my bike repaired, I would never go to that place. And what am I stepping foot inside, some, I don't know, are they going to kidnap me, or are they going to lock me in? What's really, is it a front for some, drug organization or something like that? And we've realized that even the exterior of our building can communicate things to our neighbors about who we are or what we're like. And so we want to give that thought. We want to show consideration to the neighborhood, that we're a part of it in some way, in a lesser way than the people who actually live here, but we are a part of it. Showing consideration is one thing, showing care. Are there ways that we as a church, Grace Bible Church, can show care for the neighbors around us. I think one way that this is already happening, by no planning on the elders' part, is the clothing exchange. You know, it actually does meet a need for a number of people in relative proximity to the church. But Daylin just came to our elder meeting this past week and to share about the ministry and told us there are people from the neighborhood that come. Now, she was saying she wants to see more people from the neighborhood, but there are people who live within walking distance who come and get free clothes and household items and appreciate that. I'm sure there are other ways that we could be good neighbors as a church who's right here at the corner of 11th and Redwood. I don't know, does anybody have ideas about how we as a congregation could be good neighbors to the folks right around here? Hannah.
I saw in the bulletin we have the trunk or treat event coming up. So even just something like maybe making a flyer and passing it out for anyone that has kids in the neighborhood that they're welcome to come as well.
Yeah. Hank. That was a very emphatic hand raising.
Need this thing. I think what we've been doing, we should keep doing, is the picnic we have out here on Sunday afternoons. Just people seeing us hanging out, and it might stir some curiosity.
Yeah, definitely. Also helps again with that issue of helping people see we're not weirdos. They're like, oh, they look like normal people. Like they look like people I see around town. We're weirdos for other reasons, but. All right, let me come back to the questions I had for you at the beginning. Maybe some of you have thought of something as we've talked about how, kind of two questions. How has this class challenged you? And are you doing anything differently as a result of the class? So I don't know if anybody, since 9 o'clock has come up, remembered anything or thought of anything they wanted to share. Caleb.
Yeah, my wife's staring at me, so I have to share this. Last Friday, I got home from work. My neighbor needed his car jumped, so I jumped his car. And then Saturday morning, we woke up. He goes knock on my door. Open the door. The same neighbor. He's like, "Hey, I lost my car last night." He's like, "I pulled it over, and the battery died, ran out of gas. You helped me out yesterday. Could you help me out today?" And just drive me around, look for my car, and then buy me some gas and jump my car again. And I was like, in my head, I was like, no. Before this class, I would have come up with some sort of excuse and been like, yeah, I'm broke too, dude. But yeah, I was like, yeah, let me just grab my stuff and we'll drive around, look for your car. And 3 hours later, we found his car and bought him a pack of cigarettes. Jumped his car, filled it up with gas, and then he was super thankful. Mentioned that we go to this church and everything, and he's like, yeah, you should come over, have dinner with me and my wife sometime. Wow. And all these different things. So before this class, I wouldn't have done that. But it was encouraging to come here and learn these lessons and be like, okay, I had to make more of an effort and show the love of Christ and not be selfish.
Yeah, that's great. I can share an example of how it's challenged me, and I haven't done anything about it. So our neighborhood, we've been in the neighborhood, I think, 15 years. And we actually know Stephanie better than I do, but Stephanie and I know the couple, the houses right across the street, and just there's this whole, the way our neighborhood is set up is very conducive for people just kind of hanging out outside. And there's a number of people with young kids that their kids are out there riding bikes and stuff like that. And a lot of them have lived there for a long time as well. And Stephanie will spend a lot of time out there, especially, in the afternoons. Josh, our youngest, needs to get outside and run around, and he's friends with the kids. And I've been challenged that I typically don't spend a lot of time outside unless I'm working in the yard or something like that. I come home and I'm like, I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want to people anymore. And at least what the class has done has made me think about, okay, that needs to change. Maybe I don't need to be, Mr. Social Butterfly in the neighborhood, but I can do more than I am now. And I know the people, and we'll chat, but I could make a better effort to just, everybody's just out there hanging out. The parents are kind of just chatting and getting to know each other, and while the kids are playing, and that doesn't take that much effort. I could make a little effort. So ask me in a few weeks if I've done anything about it. Matt.
Just share a small thing, something that I've seen Kelsey do pretty continuously since we were in South Dakota, and then now at the seminary, has had some, you're wondering what I'm going to say, and I'm really excited about that. But Kelsey has a way of just parlaying her strengths. So she loves to bake or cook, and she always makes more than we're ever going to get through. And so it's kind of like, well, we're sitting on all this extra, and Matt, so she does that, and I'm the one that doesn't mind walking up to people with a loaf of banana bread or whatever it might be. So that's a way that we built relationships in South Dakota with our neighbors who we had never known before, was just sitting on some extra homemade food, and people usually don't say no unless there's some allergy considerations or whatever. And then it's not her favorite thing in the world to go knock on a stranger's door, but it doesn't bother me. So we kind of work together as a team on that. So that's just one of those things where it's not something that's way out of her wheelhouse to be baking or cooking, and it's also not out of my wheelhouse to go knock on a door. So that's what I'm thinking about, sort of the parlaying your strengths. Not, yes, I could flex a little, stretch a little bit more and help her in the kitchen, but I do. Never mind.
Food is great. That is a great way to connect with people, and that's a great combination of strengths that you guys have that can work together. Anything else before we wrap up? All right, so I will close us out. We are, so this was the last Sunday for Neighboring Revisited. Next Sunday, I'll speak for Craig. I think he's planning to do this. He told me he was. Next Sunday, he's gonna do a class on a hymn. I don't know which one yet, but he's gonna talk about some of the history of the hymn, and then look at the lyrics with us and kind of walk through some of the scriptural allusions and theology in the hymn, just so that we could sing that hymn with just maybe better understanding in the future. So I don't know yet which hymn he's going to do. And then the following Sunday, we're going to start a new Sunday school series on the mission of GBC. So we're going to spend several weeks talking about what we're about as a church, who we are, what we believe, what we strive to do, and that kind of thing. Some of it will dovetail a little bit with the neighboring class, but we have a lot of newer people here, and it's been a while since we've talked about those things. So we're going to spend some time on that. So keep coming. It's nice having you all here early on Sunday mornings. I know it cuts into sleep time, but I think it'll be worth your effort to get here. So let me pray, and then we'll be done for this morning. Father in heaven, we thank you that you have placed us in a particular place, and would you help us as your people to get to know the place where you've planted us? Would you help us to invest in that place? Lord, would you give us increased just awareness of our neighbors and who they are and what their needs are? And would you help each of us to either come out of our shell or to not be so particular about spending our time the way we want, but would you help us all, Lord, to slow down and pay attention and invest in getting to know people and looking for ways to show the love of Christ to them. So Lord, use Grace Bible Church as a good neighbor in this particular neighborhood. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.